All right, so we are going to take a look at some data here on some actual examples of some situations that have come up and see if we can use some spreadsheets to summarize and analyze it a little bit. So we're just finishing up right now, September, and hurricane season in the Atlantic Ocean and in the Gulf of Mexico. You may have heard a few hurricanes this year because I think there have been many of them. So much that they've gone through the entire alphabet naming them and are on to what I think the Greek alphabet at this point. But the hurricane season starts in early summer, maybe late spring, maybe May, June, and lasts through, about now, September and November. So you hear about them this time of year. And they can be extremely expensive depending on how big they are, how windy they are, where they hit, big cities or small cities, the amount of rain that's dropped. So we have some data here on the hurricanes. Below is the list of the 15 most expensive hurricanes on record prior to the current hurricane season, so before this hurricane season. And so if we look at these, you might recognize some of the names, like Katrina is one of the more famous ones, but Sandy is another famous one. There's some older ones here that you may have heard of as well. Matthew, Irene, Andrew, some very expensive ones. Harvey is the one from last year, or actually a couple years ago now, 2017, I guess that would have been 3 years ago, that dropped a lot of rain from what I can remember, and that was the flooding was a big part of that one. So what do you notice about these? So I'm noticing some different things. I guess we're going to look at the nominal damage over here. Noticing that some are a lot more expensive than others. So some are more expensive than others. And also noticing that some seasons seem to be worse than others. Like 3 of the top 4 were in 2017. 3 of top 4 most expensive hurricanes. Hurricanes were in 2017. So that happens. Like this season is another big season for hurricanes, and so you'll notice that there are some seasons that have repeated hurricanes that are very damaging, and some people think with the warming oceans that we are getting more and more damaging hurricanes now than ever before. You have to look back at evidence to decide whether you think that is true or not, but I've heard that said. What do you wonder about this? I wonder, why are some hurricanes more expensive than others? There's a lot of things you might be wondering. Like, how about something like, where did they get these names? Where did these names come from? Usually big storms are named. I think winter storms are also named, so that might be something that you're wondering. What's another wonder here? How about, why are some years worse than others? Is it by chance? What's happening in those years? There's a number of things that you might be wondering about this if you think about that. And I love weather, so I'm kind of fascinated by the things that are happening with weather. What statistical questions could we ask about the data? What would be interesting to know? So statistical, now we're talking about number questions. Like think of some of the things that we have talked about before. So something like, I don't know, what is the average cost of the hurricanes? What's the average damage? So maybe something like that, or maybe what is the total cost of these top hurricanes? We added them up. Or maybe what is the most expensive? In other words, the maximum. That might be easy to tell on this, but it's certainly a question that we can ask. If you were really getting into it, you might think of like the 5-number summary. Like, what is the, let's think of something within the 5-number summary, like the interquartile range of cost. Because remember, that's a question that we could ask about the variability, the interquartile range, the difference between that upper quartile, 75th percentile, and the lower quartile. Maybe you want to ask about what's the mean absolute deviation. These are all statistical questions that we can help answer and determine maybe some more information about the hurricanes themselves. Okay, so let's now take a look at some specific data that we can figure out. So down below here we have a link again, and this link is something you may have to type in unless you brought it up ahead of time with some of this hurricane data, and we're going to use a spreadsheet to figure out at least 3 things: the sum, the mean, and the median of these costs. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So bit.ly/hurricane data, the caps do matter in this case. So let's go ahead and see if we can open that up. Let's get out of here and let's go into our browser. All right, so let's actually delete that. So bit.ly/hurricane. Oops, hurricane. And notice I brought this up before, so it's popping up. So hurricane data with a capital H and a capital D. It'll force us to make a copy, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so now we have a list of some of that data, and we're going to find the sum, the mean, and the median of this. All right, so at this point, if we want to, I suppose we could do a split screen. So maybe we bring up the Notability. Let's see if we can grab that and bring over a split screen, see if that works for us. Seems like it will. All right, so let's go ahead and do the sum. So remember to do the sum, and notice we're going to get the sum of the costs in the C column here, so the nominal damage. Notice that the first one that we have is in C2, and the last one we have is in C16. So let's click on the sum and double click on it. And let's go ahead and put, oops, let's cancel that. So let's try that again. So I'm going to go up there and into the function bar. Okay, we're going to do equals. And let's do the sum. All right, the sum of what we say, C2 colon C16. All right, so we did parentheses. Oh, so let's just go through that formula again. So equals sum, parentheses, C2 colon C16. So that's going to add everything together between cell C2 and cell C16. So let's press enter, and we have that number. Now that number is so big that we can't hardly see it. Let's see if we can, I'm just going to double click on that. Okay, so if I double click on it, I can start to see it pop up again. So I'm just going to bring that over a little bit, see if we can take a look over here. All right, so split screen this thing, and we have, look at how big that number is. So we're talking about 720 billion 100 million. So stick 6 more zeros behind that. $720,100,000,000. That's a really big number. And the formula for that was equals sum, parentheses, C2 colon C16. Okay, good. Let's come back over to our spreadsheet again, and let's go on to the next one. So mean, let's go ahead and type in equals now. Now the mean, now in a spreadsheet, the mean actually, I believe the word average has to be used when we are calculating the mean. Okay, so average, yes. So we're going to do average, parentheses, C2 colon C16. Return. Okay. So once again, that's a really big number for our average. And so that's 48,6,666,667. Holy smokes, that is big. Not quite as big as the total sum, of course, but let's see if we can write that in here. So this time I have 48,6,666,667, and that was the average of C2 colon C16. Parentheses around that. All right. Let's go ahead and do the third one here. And so we're going to go ahead and do the median. So let's double click on that again. I believe median, you can actually use the word median, which hopefully makes sense. Median. See it pop up there. You can just kind of click on that and fill it then. So we have C2 colon C16. Turn. Okay. Bring that over again. Actually, I'm going to double click on that just so I can see the whole number. All right, so the median is 27,300,000,000. So notice the mean is actually twice as much as the median. Both of these should be kind of like your typical, your measures of center sort of information. So it's interesting, at least I find it's interesting. Maybe you do or do not find that interesting, but that the mean, the average, is a lot more than the median, even though they're both supposed to give you kind of measure of what's typical or the measure of center. So we're going to be talking about that idea in some upcoming sections with what happens when the mean is bigger versus when the median is bigger, or when they're the same. Okay, so there we have some numbers that we can kind of think about and analyze. And so what we're going to have you guys do is basically take that idea and do a spreadsheet for the forest fire data. So the forest fire data, if you've been following the news in the last, especially last month, the western part of the United States is one of the biggest fire seasons in history. There's been, I think, the biggest fire ever, biggest forest fire ever in the West right now. So that has been something that has been a high concern. And so we have some data related to some of the previous years on that. And I'd like you to go through the same sorts of questions. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Open up a spreadsheet related to the forest fire data. And once again, do the sum, the mean, and the median for both, in this case, the number of fires and also the acres burned. So you're going to have to do a sum calculation for the number of fires, and then also a sum calculation for the acres burned, and the same thing with the mean or median. And then that will take you to the next section where you're going to use your computer, maybe a little Google search, and see if you can figure out how to create some other graphs of these that we've talked about, the histogram and the box plot. See if you can use a website that actually helps you calculate those. When you are bringing in a picture, because it asks you to bring in a screenshot, so you bring in a screenshot, use the little plus sign up here in the top right of your Notability, and then bring it in from the camera roll or the photo library. So you just take something and whatever it happens to be, and then you can just drag that in, okay? So that's just a little refresher on how to do that. And then try the "Are you ready for more?" questions as well. After that, you can come back and check some of the answers that might be provided in a separate link. So go on and finish the rest of the notes, and then check some of those answers, and then proceed.